Good evening, everyone, and welcome to On the Line Live. I'm Steve Erickson. On Wednesday of this week, the British Columbia government made another major announcement, but this time it was about Delta, and in particular, Burns Bog. The media event was a major proportion and was held at the Town & Country Motor Inn, and the reason for all the commotion and the hustle and bustle was to announce that the Pacific National Exhibition will be relocating, possibly to Burns Bog. The announcement calls for a major theme park in the northeastern sector of the bog alongside a huge complex incorporating a 40-hectare P&E and other entertainment and high-tech industries. The trade-off would preserve the 1,200 hectares of the 4,000-hectare bog already. On the outset, it doesn't sound bad. The proposal will develop an area of the bog that is already situated beside an industrial area, and development for this area seems doomed for the future. It will also bring 5,000, possibly, jobs with an annual payroll of approximately $150 million, economical support, and much-needed tourism to the area of Delta. Over the next 15 to 20 years, Delta could receive an extra $10 million in revenue annually. The government will contribute a $25 million loan to the developer, Delta Fraser Properties. This is a repayable over 3 years and a promise to develop a road infrastructure and to the service site along a tax credit to the company for the land handed over as a nature reserve. But before we think of this as a major money undertaking, let's first look at what we stand to lose. The bog is the largest raised dome bog in North America. Part of it's used for peat and cranberry farms, as well as the largest garbage dump west of Toronto. We must remember that the bog is home to the falcons, some of the black bears, the threatened sandhill cranes, and some of the rarest plants in North America. We are told that there will be a complete study done on all, and I emphasize all, environmental issues, and these issues will be made available to the public, and given the public outcry that will be heard, I do believe that the Delta Fraser Properties will be very open in all respects to this aspect of the property. Nature at its best lives in Burns Bog, and all parties involved in this project must not forget this. Animal and plant life was around long before we were, and we can't allow a project even to begin without knowing all the facts. Despite your different political views, I ask you to keep an open mind in all areas. Mayor Johnson and the councillors will take all necessary steps to ensure that the best interests of Delta are upheld in all aspects of this development. We are not only discussing the present, but we are discussing the future, not only ours, but that of our children. And they have minds of their own. For us to convince them that they don't want this is teaching racism. This project has merit on both sides, so remember, minds are like parachutes. They only work when they're open.
Burns Bog. At one time or another, many of these 10,000 acres have been mined for peat, flooded for cranberries, filled with garbage. On this special edition of Plugged In, we'll look at a new proposal for this internationally important and ecologically sensitive area.
I believe that that with the proper planning and the proper work and the proper questions answered, it could be a wonderful thing for Delta, but it's the people who will tell us whether they're convinced.
Burns Bog is widely recognized as having ecological significance. It's home to the sandhill crane, rare plants and insects. However, only a small portion of the bog is publicly owned and therefore protected from peat mining or cranberry farming. About 5,000 acres, about half of the bog, is privately owned by Western Delta Lands, and as privately owned land, only zoning bylaws protect this sensitive area from development.
So I'm very, very doubtful that this proposal is worth the impact it's going to have on our community.
Over the years, in an effort to protect the bog by turning it into parkland, many groups and organizations, including the GBRD, the municipality, and the Burns Bog Conservation Society, have tried unsuccessfully to buy Burns Bog from Western Delta Lands.
It's going to cost us millions of dollars. This thing is a sponge. We're going to have flooding, all sorts of things down there. The only way they can have a green place is to build the whole thing on stilts.
Until now, it seemed as though Burns Bog was destined to be developed in a piecemeal fashion, swallowed up by cranberry farms or peat extraction.
If we could, in fact, get the kind of development that they're proposing and ensure that the integrity of the bog is maintained forever, then it's a win-win. and what we need to do now is go through that process of consulting with the public, getting the science put in front of us so that we know where we're at with that. And if we can do that, yeah, it's a win-win.
An announcement was made at a press conference at the Town and Country Inn on Wednesday, February 3rd, that would see 3,000 acres of Burns Bog turned into a nature reserve, with the remaining 2,000 acres to include a movie studio, theme park, themed retail, an amphitheater, housing, and the PNE.
This is a win-win-win situation. It's a good business venture for Delta and for the province of British Columbia, with many jobs. It's a new home for the PNE, the best agricultural fair in the country. And it's a chance, perhaps the final chance, to preserve the Burns Bog. I think this is win-win-win.
Words of Mr. Ian Waddell, and with any luck, Mr. Waddell will be phoning us on live tonight from Victoria. And we would like to remind everyone at this time, watch the Plugged In program on Delta Cable tonight at 9 p.m. because there will be highlights of the media event involving this Burns Bog major issue that naturally is going to be something that's going to be very confrontational in our Delta area. And joining us without further hesitation on our program tonight, we have three councillors. First off, to my immediate right, we have Wendy Jeske, in the centre, Vicky Huntington, and on the far end, and not to put you down at the end, George, George Hawksworth. Councillors, welcome.
Good evening.
Okay, first off, lots of issues involving this major Burns Bog issue, and I know it's going to be a very contentious issue, as we were talking earlier on.
There's no question about that. I think the community today, my assessment of things is that people are just dumbstruck by this. I've talked to a lot of people throughout the day and other media groups, and they are just simply thunderstruck by the immensity of this whole thing. And I think the thing you have to remember as well is that there's no application yet. There's nothing we can actually see as councillors to make any kind of determination. And the province has committed itself to an environmental assessment of the whole area, but I think the thing that has to be remembered in all of this is that if the public doesn't accept it, to me, it's a no-go. Yeah.
Vicky?
I agree completely. Dumbstruck is a good word. I was looking around for the word that described my feeling after the press conference yesterday, and I have to say that I was extremely depressed. I found myself inexplicably depressed during that press conference, and I think I realized why today. There has been some sense, I think from my perspective, the mayor has indicated that there is some excitement about this proposal, and that we will be taking it through the process. Certainly the proponents have expected Delta Council to take a leadership role in taking it through that process. It wasn't until just a little while ago I realized that we apparently have been committed to a public process before we've seen an application or even gone to first reading. Mm-hmm. And last night the mayor during the press conference, the mayor stated that there would be citizen advisory committees and citizen technical committees. Well, that's not part of a normal public hearing process, nor is it part of a normal area planning process, which we've been attempting to engage in. So I'm dumbstruck is a good word. I'm very disturbed by the proposal.
George, how long ago did Delta Council learn about this media event?
Well, I would say we heard rumors about it for the last month, but didn't have.
But until Wednesday,
didn't possess any detail until Wednesday. No, certainly had no idea from the map of what it happened to look like.
So you had no prior knowledge of what was going on?
Tuesday we had a briefing. I wasn't able to attend the press conference on time, but it added a bit of more information, I think. But basically, we'd heard about it in detail on the Tuesday night. But I would just like to add a comment, if
Sure.
I could. When I first heard about this, say in rumor form some time ago, I was quite enthusiastic, and I thought, well, here's an opportunity to achieve one thing that I think this council has gone on record as wanting to achieve, and that is to ensure that at least a significant portion of the bog, the part that is necessary, the heart of the bog, could be preserved. We have also gone on record as wanting to undertake a Burns Bog area planning process with the landowner, which was Western Delta Lands at the time, in order to determine if some development would be possible. Now the question is if some development would be possible, meaning that would the development be safe? Would it impact on the bog? Would it possibly destroy the rest of the bog if you use some of it for industrial development or some other development? So what this is a form of that. I disagree with Councillor Huntington in the respect is that this council is not committed to anything. We have to go through the process of first and second reading. If we decide to do that and say that we want it to go to public hearing, we may do that in first and second reading in order to get it to public hearing so we can hear from the public. But my first priority is saving the bog as much as we possibly can. And the second priority, of course, is another one that's important to Delta, and that's economic development. If this represents a boon in economic development, it's worth accepting.
I think the question the public are asking is it worth developing 2,000 acres to save 3,000? And will the 3,000 remaining actually be saved? Or will they be dead?
No, that's very true. I've heard that today from a lot of individuals.
And that's the fundamental question. And, you know, I think the other part, one of the things that actually angers me about this is the P&E, even though the P&E is a very small component of the entire proposal that they unveiled yesterday, Ian Aikenhead and the P&E group came to us several summers ago wanting to know if they could have any of that land out there. Would we be amenable to it? And we said, no, absolutely not. And so that was the last we saw of them. And so in a way, they've gotten indirectly what we said directly we wouldn't support.
At that time, a couple of things. When Councillor Hawksworth, and when George says that we've known that there were negotiations in progress, I thought, and I thought the rest of us thought, that those negotiations were to consolidate a group who could purchase the bog outright. That's what I understood to be going on. I didn't understand that the province was going to write off, make it possible to write off Western Delta Land's debt to Zurich so that the same owners with a partner could engage in a large-scale development if we would help it through the process and if the public presumed it. And so that was one of my disappointments, and it's funny how you start to detail how deeply disappointed you were and what the problems were. Wendy's right. It seems an impossibility to contemplate saving a portion of that bog without massive infrastructure works to preserve the hydrologic flow. And they'll all say, oh, that's what we'll do during the environmental assessment process. But we've seen how those assessments go, especially in this province with this government, and this government wants this land. And the other issue that you mentioned, because I really wanted to.
Well, for me, the one aspect was the P&E.
Yeah. If on the map, if they could flash up the map, there is a large.
Okay, there it's up now.
That orange portion is the, especially the right-hand half of the orange portion, is all of that raw, undeveloped, filled land that you see along River Road that's so horrible
Just
and
to the
ugly.
east of River Road?
Demolition
That's
sites.
all
Right.
heavy industrial land. At the time the P&E came to us a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, I suggested, and I think others agreed, that if there was a suggestion that they were going to consolidate that land and look at that, then that would be maybe a better use than letting it sit there as demolition landfill sites. But to actually move in to the bog itself is very disconcerting. Plus, that map is not clearly representative of the amount of land they're talking about. It exaggerates the green side.
Yeah, and how the P&E folds into this is sort of a mystery because Surrey was the one who expressed a keen interest in actually having the P&E.
Initially, yeah. We were under the impression that when they first announced that the P&E might be moving, we were actually under the impression it might be moving out towards the flatland, Surrey, about 176 and Fraser Highway area.
Yeah.
So,
I just want to say that, you know, I think we're all, at least I am, I'm in the position of sort of 5 out of about 10 on the issue. I'm in the middle. There's an awful lot of information we have to obtain.
That's
we
very
have to
right.
obtain information concerning the economic potential for the community. We talk about jobs, taxes, and so on. But more importantly, we have to determine whether indeed any kind of development is compatible with saving a significant portion of the bog. And if it's not, it ought to get turned down first on that basis. But having said that, there are only 3 scenarios for saving the bog, or for dealing with the bog. One is to look at some kind of development such as this and a gift of the of a significant portion. The other one is to buy it, and buying it would cost somewhere around $40 million minimum, because this section that we're looking at now on the map, or did look at the map that was to be gifted,
And it's back up
was offered for $27 or $29 million, and it was turned down by the
27
developer.
million, yeah.
There's still a significant chunk left if we want to buy 5,500 acres. So I would say you'd estimate somewhere $35 to $40 million, which is a lot of money, and maybe that's what we should do. But that offer is not out there. And the other
We had the chance to buy that for the price of that foreclosure notice, and that was lost to us. That's what's happened
I think you're incorrect on that one. In regard, all we would have obtained if anybody had bought it for the 17 to 19 million on the foreclosure, was you would have bought a horseshoe shape around the east end.
Yeah, it wouldn't have got.
You would have missed 1,800
yeah.
acres in the center,
That's
which
right.
would have
Yeah.
then thrown the price up over 30 million.
Well, we've
There's
got a caller
another,
on the line right now.
There's
so-
another aspect to this, and that is when you look at the map, again, the southern and western portions show you all of that light green land. Most of that is in agriculture today. And I think the impact on those farms of a development of this scale would be enormous.
It sure would.
Because of the water flow in the area.
Okay, no
and
questions.
so I think that, you know, the impact goes well beyond the actual site itself.
Okay, we've got our first caller on the line for us this evening. Jamie,
Hi.
how are you? Thanks for calling.
I guess one of these dumbfounded people about salt fraud. I can't believe that. I can't believe that this is even a possibility, and that intelligent people would consider it a possibility. It's like paving over the Amazon. I mean, you don't do that. I'm not an ecological fanatic, but this one is obvious, and I just cannot believe that there's a possibility of this going ahead. The other thing is that who is going to who's going to be responsible for all of the studies involved in this? I mean, it seems to me that there should be an independent body other than the municipality and the government who are going to be determining the safety of something like this for the environment. Really, in all aspects, I think there's got to be independent bodies that examine this.
Okay, Jamie, let me ask you a question. If the PNE was to relocate to the Delta area, are you in favor of it relocating to the Delta area? And two is, if you are, where would you have it located possibly?
Well, not on the bog. I mean,
Okay, that's understood. But where? Is there another area situated in Delta that
look,
we could relocate
I don't
it?
really care where the PNE is. I haven't gone in about 20 years.
We weren't even interested
Doesn't
in the
really
PNE.
matter to me.
We didn't.
To put it on the bog is,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember reading the article in the paper by Mr. Cummings saying, you know, what are these people thinking? And I'm asking, who is thinking here?
Mm-hmm.
The politicians can't be. I mean, there must be just money involved in this. That's the major consideration. And just like anything else that runs roughshod over the environment and the concerns of the residents, that would be the primary concern. I also feel very disturbed by the approach that our council takes to major projects like this that impact on us as a community. The element of surprise seems to be very major with this council, and I find this very disturbing. I'm very concerned that if this council gets reelected, that we will have absolutely no say, because we have elected for this council to come in, and major projects like this, greenhouses, the PNE on the bog, many other things which are really affecting us in a major way. I mean, I'm considering whether I want to live here much longer if these things continue.
Can I respond to that?
And
I'd like to
I just feel that our concerns as individuals, as citizens, is just going to be completely ignored after this election. And this project, which is probably going to be held back till after the election, this makes it a very dangerous situation as far as I'm concerned.
It does. It does make it extremely difficult, Jamie.
The timing is terrible for us too. But as far as the element of surprise is concerned, it gets us the most because we're not a party to the agreements that have been made here. I mean, it's going to be interesting to have Mr. Waddell on here later on tonight because the agreements have been made between the province and this new company that Western Delta Lands has set up. And an agreement between themselves and the PNE, and it's being unveiled to Delta as well. We've been told for about a month that there was something coming together like this, but that we didn't have a role until they'd announced it. And so, you know, if you're worried about the element of surprise, we are as well.
Yeah, no kidding.
Excuse me, Steve.
Okay.
Wendy unfortunately wasn't able to be at the meeting last night, or on Tuesday night when we received our briefing. It's quite obvious this didn't come as a big surprise to people in our municipality that knew about it, including the mayor. They know a lot more detail than we even know yet. And I find that so insulting. That we weren't able to be briefed adequately to even have a say in whether we would support it.
Before you get to your answer, we do have another caller we have to take right now because the lines are just loaded right up. Ken, next caller.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for calling.
You're welcome. I'd like to know what kind of impact this is going to have on the North Delta residents' property values. Will this drive property values down, do you think, in any estimations?
Well, the situation where you ask whether it could drive property values down, let's face it, with the PNE being situated in the Greater Vancouver area right now, Renfrew and Hastings area, the property values have sustained a natural, I guess, basic area where they're fluctuating. They're not going up, they're not going down, they're just holding their own right now. It could increase, no question, it could. And I say that in capital letters with exclamation marks all over it. It could increase the value of property taxes. But then the biggest thing that we talked about yesterday at the press conference, you have to look at also the highways and the location of bringing people in and the transportation. I mean, it's all nice to say, gee, we want this here. But once we get the people here, where do they go?
They were estimating,
you don't have a major hotel in Delta.
2 million visitors is what Waddell estimated during that press conference.
George?
I think what we're really getting at is, and I think what the previous caller, Jamie, and what this caller is getting at with respect to economic, or the impact, the socioeconomic impact on the community, and what the previous caller was getting at in terms of the environmental impact, those are unknowns at this present time. And I think the advice that we received is very good advice in that we're going to have to find independent means through independent scientific study and analysis of the environmental issues. I think the public in North Delta are going to have to feel reasonably convinced that this is in their best interest from either an economic point of view or from the point of view of saving the bog. One point that I was wanting to make to the previous caller, and that, you know, we're faced with alternatives here. The alternative, which is the easiest alternative, of course, would be to simply say, you know, I'm just going to turn my back on this automatically. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear about it because it's in the bog. What the problem with that is that right now the bog, the heartland of the bog, is owned by this company as well. And they have indicated plans to develop cranberry harvesting in that particular area. That would possibly have worse impact than this kind of development. And the reason is because that's the very heart of the bog. That's the section that has to be preserved. Now, if they develop it for cranberry farming through, say, contracts with Ocean Spray, you will definitely change the hydrology of that section of the bog.
Oh, no question.
And that will probably destroy the rest of the bog. So, so what we're looking at is some difficult choices between something like this, or outright purchase, which is an option that I'd like to see followed, or if we just leave the status quo, it's not static. Things will change. There will be development as long as this bog remains in private hands.
There will, and we do have another caller on the line right now, so we'll go to him right away. Blair.
Yes, this Alberta oil man, Byron Seaman,
Yes.
and Daryl Seaman,
Yes.
is he connected with stateside drilling for natural gas?
I don't know. That was not disclosed at yesterday's meeting. I do know that Byron Seamings was part owner with the Calgary Flames Hockey Club a while back. He did tell me that. Yeah. But before anything else was released, no, that was not told to us at all.
Yeah, well, it's in Wednesday. Wednesday, February 399. In front of the meeting, sponsored by Burns Bog at the election,
Yep, 3 years ago.
and said, "I will protect the Burns Bog forever."
Right.
Even Bulldozer Bruce got up there.
Well, that's precisely what
He's quite right. Every one of us said that. Everyone
agree
feels
with
the same way. We are still under threat of a suit that Western Delta Lands launched against a number of us on previous council over measures we took with respect to the peat mining that was going on in the backfilling. And we took those measures to protect the bog, and Western Delta Lands sued us. A number of us went through examinations for discovery, all in the name of that bog. And he's right, we have attempted to do that. The most frustrating thing, I think, for me was when the discussion collapsed between the province and Western Delta Lands 2 years ago in the Nature Legacy, or 3 years ago, when the province offered up $29 million, plus all of the land around it that Delta had, and that collapsed. And I thought that was a very fair offer, given that this council had not seen fit to develop that bog and couldn't see its way to doing that.
At that time.
Yeah, and so, Mr. Clark is right. I think the councillors still feel the same way.
Exactly.
And we are,
There's an interesting thing,
struck by this.
I was thinking today, we talk about that core of the bog that one really not terribly well done study has indicated is the core. Well, yeah, it's the center of what used to be the domed bog. That bog used to go from the Fraser River to Boundary Bay. All we've got left is what's there now. And we're talking about trying to preserve a third of what's left. When does it collapse? No environmental study is going to tell you that, because the science in relation to peat bogs is so poor at this point, in North America especially. They're reclaiming their bogs in Holland, reclaiming them. They are destroying their dikes and reclaiming their bogs because they have found the natural process of absorbing excess water that a bog undertakes in an estuary is critical.
That's right. So we have to look at possibly doing something with this, but we'll see right now.
No, I didn't say that. I just said, here we have one. We don't have to do anything.
Next caller on the line, Ray.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on, number one, there's the possibility of the original owner looking at cranberries going in there, and I'm not too sure that that's environmentally safe or not. And number two would be the traffic concerns in that area if the P&A ever did build in there. Like, my gosh, we can't even complete the Nordell Way yet, so I don't know how we would ever get people in and out of there with P&E traffic and stuff.
No, that's very true.
He mentioned the cranberry farms, and the owner of the lands before the foreclosure attempted to plunge right into the center of the bog with a road to point out to people that he was going to start cranberry farming. And when you talk to the bona fide cranberry farmers around there, that was just a measure taken to shock people, because cranberry farmers would not do what the owners of the day did there by plunging that road through and sculpting it out the way they did. And so I think that he did that to shock everyone into this. The quota system for cranberry production is very regulated and very difficult to break into. And so I don't think he really had any realistic objective in mind of true cranberry farming. I think he just did this to terrify people.
Just a way to get his foot in the door to expand later on.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have another caller on the line right now. Laura.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for calling.
My question's more around the traffic problems and getting the people to the P&E. I mean, the environmental issues are pretty well given. The bog is critical to protect, but most people go to the P&E via public transit. Would it not make more sense for these proposal folks to look at a site in Surrey closer to the SkyTrain stations, like those old, the car wrecker places?
You're talking down off River Road to the west of River Road.
There's land over there that would make more sense than putting more traffic along an already very small River Road and the other.
Okay, George?
I think, Laura, you're right that the traffic issues are paramount along with the environmental and economic issues. And certain tests will have to be met. One of them will have to be that a transportation study is going to have to be undertaken to determine what the users of this development, if it ever goes ahead, how many there are going to be, and how they're going to get in and out. And we've heard that it may take a fair amount of money to actually upgrade the transportation system, particularly the question of adding another lane to Highway 91 if you're dealing with traffic coming from both the south and the north. We're going to have to, what was also raised was the question of actually twinning River Road so that a little further south, so to accommodate traffic that would go to the west, and possibly dealing with the Highway 17, Highway 99 intersection. But that's a major issue, and I say that the environmental issues have to be dealt with to the public satisfaction. The transportation issues are going to have to be dealt with, and at the same time we're going to have to take a good, cold, hard look on the viability of this economic proposal as to whether indeed it will work and provide the jobs and the taxes that that it says, that the proponents say it's going to. So I believe we really have a responsibility to take a very close look at all of the claims that have been made and determine whether they're valid or not. And the public have to be fully informed with all the information that's available to council and government and the private developer, so that we all together can make a decision as to whether this is worth pursuing or not.
Okay, thanks very much, Laura.
Now, I've
got to put you on hold for half a second.
Well, the government is fast-tracking the infrastructure studies as we speak.
Okay, we'll address those issues real quick, because we do, as I promised everyone earlier on, we are joined on the line by Honourable Minister Ian Waddell from Victoria. Mr. Waddell, I am joined right here in studio by Wendy Jeske, Vicky Huntington, and George Hawksworth, three of Delta's councillors. First off, thank you for calling.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for calling, Honourable Minister.
Oh, not at all.
First off, we've had major concerns, lots of calls this evening on the program. One of the major concerns for this is the environmental aspect, the studies that will be undertaken. Can you maybe elaborate to our viewing public?
Well, as I understand it, you know, the bog is in private hands. It's unregulated now. I don't believe Delta can regulate it. We can't afford to expropriate it. We tried before. We offered $27 million for a piece of it, and we couldn't get it. They wouldn't sell it to us. Now, this agreement has got over 3,000 acres, which I consider the heartland of the bog, and we got it as a public park. I think that's a terrific victory. Now, we need to look. I heard one of your councillors say we need to study it, and we need to have open environmental studies and hearings and get people involved to show that we can have development north of the bog there and not lose the bog. And I agree with that. I agree that we have to look at it. But I believe that this proposal is perhaps the last best chance to save the bog. I went through the bog the other day, and I looked at it, and I took the helicopter over it, and I saw the development in the north. I saw the cranberry farms. I saw the roads that are going in there. And, you know, this is a chance to put it, I think, the major part of the bog into a public park. But we have to make sure that the hydrology is right and that it'll work and the bog will be preserved for all time.
Okay, Mr. Waddell, Wendy Jeske would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, Mr. Waddell. Something you said just a second ago made my blood run cold, and it was concerning the studies. You said that we need studies to show we can develop the bog, and that almost sounds like the fix is in from your perspective.
Well, answer, I don't have any fix. If the studies show otherwise, then we don't go ahead with the development.
Okay, and if you didn't go, okay, under the assumption, just putting in the hot seat real quick, under the assumption you don't go ahead with the proposal, would you be willing to relocate it elsewhere if this is what the general public says or the development studies say?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a private sector development. It's not my development. It's these people are investing their own money in it. What I brought to it is insistence in getting the bog into public hands, the major part of the bog, and bringing the PNE. I'm responsible for the PNE. I have to move the PNE from Vancouver. Our lease is up. I would like to move the PNE into an agricultural area. The PNE is a terrific asset, let me tell you. You've got 5,000 jobs for your young people in the summer. You've got a great fair, and you've got a family-oriented and very attractive to tourists. So I think it in itself is a terrific asset.
Okay, Vicky, would you like to ask Mr. Waddell a question?
Well, there's so many questions to ask, but Mr. Waddell, are you a member of the Fraser Basin Council, or were you not involved in it?
I used to be chair of the Fraser Basin Board. When I left federal politics in 1993, I was appointed. It was a federal, provincial, municipal appointment to chair. And then Iona Campanola came after me, but I was the chair for a couple of years before that.
And have you run this in any way, shape, or form by the council? Have you, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry, the lights aren't on.
That's okay.
Have you run this by the Fraser Basin Council? I guess not, because it's all been
I haven't
secret.
run it by
Well, how do you feel about chairing the council, knowing that this bog is at the estuary and critical, and now proposing a development of this nature and size? And if you were so sure the PNE could go here and it doesn't, then what are you going to do for the next couple of years while the process is winding its way?
Well, let me answer one question at a time. First
Sure,
of all,
please do.
when I was on the Fraser Basin board, I was approached by the bog people to try and save the bog. The bog was being eaten up. Mm-hmm. I believe we're saving the bog, Vicki. I think we're saving the bog. And so to me, that is real progress. And there are trade-offs in this world. And the trade-off is that there's some development in the north end of the bog. But when I flew over your municipality there's a lot of development up in that river, right by the river. There's a bottleneck of a highway or a road up there, and there's bits and scattered pieces all over the bog. It didn't look very nice.
That development used to be bog, sir.
We can make it look good.
No, that development you're talking about used to be bog. George, would you like to ask a question first?
Yes, Mr. Waddell, one of the concerns I think that's coming forward from the public in general, and given that the public hasn't a great deal of information other than what they were provided for the other day, yesterday, is the question of whether indeed the province is behind this and trying to fast track it. And if they're trying to fast track it, it would worry me a great deal that perhaps we wouldn't have the time to undertake the socioeconomic studies with respect to its impact on the community of North Delta and the rest of Delta, that we wouldn't have the opportunity to have a fully and truly independent analysis of its impact on the bog, and the question of a transportation study that's thorough, that does really reflect what's going to happen. I think as long as these big questions remain as the possible risk to the rest of the bog, the part that we want to maintain, and the question of the viability of the economic activity that's going to go forward, I can see rezoning these properties and finding that they just don't survive, and then suddenly council is faced with the option of a destroyed bog for 2,000 acres, and what we'd have to do is then put something else in there that was less acceptable. How do you react to those concerns, and how are we going to address them?
I don't want to fast track anything. I want the decisions is Delta Council's decision. It's your decision, and you got to look at the proposal. And you've got to figure out if it's good for the community. And you make the final decision on the rezoning. I'm not interested in fast-tracking. Maybe people were confused when I talked about transit. I wanted to get a memorandum of understanding between the highways and the development, because you know how long it takes highways to do anything. So I wanted the highways to be there and to be aware that there had to be good highway planning. The highways have planned out to the year 2021. So we're going to be doing a lot of the highways anyway, and they eventually will have to fit into the new proposal. I don't see fast tracking. As a matter of fact, I see really all the parties coming together, and I'm not kidding. I think the environmentalists should be part of this process, and they should be in there because we might be able to identify areas in the development area, the 2,000 acres. That shouldn't be developed. That should be part of the bog.
Okay,
and there might be other areas. We might keep the periphery. We might keep different areas. I think if we work together, we might be able to I hope we'll be able to come up for a plan that satisfies everyone. And if we can't do that, and Delta Council doesn't want it, then they won't vote for it.
Okay, Mr. Waddell, Wendy would like to ask you a question.
Yeah,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the concern I have, Ian, is that you've told us that it is going to be Delta Council's decision whether or not this is a good thing for the community. But there seem to be so many things nailed down and in place already, and one of them is the $25 million government loan that these people are getting. You said a moment ago that these are private investors putting up their own money, yet they've been given a $25 million loan by the provincial government. Now, that tells me that you've made a decision already that really doesn't hinge on what the council decides in the end.
No. It's a $25,000 loan for 3 years at commercial rates, fully secured.
Okay.
These investors got money. B.J. Seaman from Alberta is from Bow Valley, Resources. He has the he's part owner of the Calgary Flames, and he's a good investor. So we think we're secured. The money was to get things going in terms of hearings, in terms of preparation for the studies and so on. We think, and to facilitate. You see, I think for the way the province looked at it, we got a great deal. We got 3,000 acres free for a park, which before was going to cost us, from anywhere from $27 to $47 million. We got 100 acres for the PNE. So what did we throw in? We threw in a $25 million repayable loan, secured. We're going to do something with a tax receipt for the bog, and we're going to help with the infrastructure of the highways, which in the end we would do anyway. So I think we got a good deal for the province. You have to decide whether it's a good deal for Delta. You got the PNE, and you got a bog that's in private and public land and public hands. I don't know. I think that's pretty darn good.
Okay, Mr. Waddell, 2 final questions. We'll let Vicky ask you one, and then George can ask the final question.
Sure, go ahead, Vic.
On Tuesday night, when Council was being briefed, we asked what the terms of the conservation area were going to be, i.e., who was going to control that land? Was it going to become Crown land, subject, as Councillor Hawksworth asked, to land claim, or is it going to be turned over fee simple to Delta?
I think it should. Well, I think there are 2 options. I think it could either be a provincial park, or it could go to the GBRD as a GBRD park. The GBRD has a lot of experience in running the parks. They run it quite well. My inclination would be to turn it over to them. I'd like to see an interpretative center for the bog. I'd like to see us do some renovation of the bog, to its natural state, the areas that have been damaged in the park. And so that's how I visualize it, but I'm open.
Is that currently we're looking at a proposal roughly should be open for development if we wish to have this gift of the remainder. The concern I have is that is far too much, and that the bog, and I'm prepared, at least in theory, to consider some kind of trade-off of development rights in one section for preservation of the rest. But you have absolutely nothing to do with this 2,000-acre section. It could. I hope Delta Council has a strong look at this and considers whittling that back to something like 1,000 acres or less.
Well, I think it will be whittled back. There's an agricultural land reserve in there, an ALR piece in there, and a couple other pieces. And I think that's part of what we have to do in the hearings. Now, you got to remember, you can't whittle it back too much, or the developer's going to say, well, to heck with that. I'm going to go back to where I was in Cranberry Farm, the bog. So, you've got to find a solution that's open to all parties. I found the investors, developers, to actually be quite reasonable people when I dealt with them. And so I'm hoping that through an inclusive planning process, you will get a win-win for Delta. And, sometimes if we work hard at it, we can get a victory for all of us.
Okay, Mr. Waddell, I'd like to truly thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to phoning us here in Delta this evening from Victoria. And maybe one day when you get over to the Lower Mainland here, we could have you in the studio as a guest.
I'd love to come.
Mr. Waddell, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And again, have a nice night.
All right, good night.
Thank you, sir. Okay, now also joining us without any further hesitation, we're going to go from one hot seat right into the frying pan. I tell you, this is a very contentious issue right now. Alyssa Olson with the Burns Bog Society, you there?
Yes, I sure am.
Yes, thank you very much for calling.
Okay, I'd like to tell you there is a 4th option, and I'm really quite deceived by the provincial government. The provincial government knew as early as November that the society was putting together a group of people to buy the 3,600 acres that was up for foreclosure. And we were not looking for anywhere like 25 million. And I find it quite reprehensible that the government feels it can give a loan to somebody, to a company that has a partner who can't even pay Delta's taxes, but they couldn't work with the Conservation Society to get this land protected.
Seems like a double-edged sword.
As far as the Cranberries are concerned, that was nothing but a ruse. We talked to Ocean Spray. They were not interested in cranberry farming. That was just an attempt to intimidate environmentalists to kneel down to this travesty.
You think it was just a little bit of a ploy for them to just roll over and hopefully that we just sit back and say, sure, we'll do this, whatever you want?
That's what we said earlier, that it was just meant to terrify people.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think she's on the line anymore. Thank you very much for your calls, because lots of interesting calls. George?
Well, the issue, I think the real solution that Eliza and we all recognize is the purchase of the entire bog, because as long as it remains, 5,500 acres remain in private hands, there'll be one owner after another. There'll be one development proposal after another. This is the third. We've had several of them mentioned. This one is offering to give some land for preservation. True, it may not be enough in my opinion, but the status quo is not static. It's continuing to evolve, and maybe we're not seeing a threat of cranberry farming, but maybe we'll see something else that's even worse. And so you've got to remember the alternative, the only viable alternative, is to purchase it. And I think we should be talking, and the whole community should be talking about some way of raising the money to purchase this if we consider this kind of proposal to be inadequate.
Okay, Vicki?
I just, now that we're concentrating on a discussion of the bog, I'd just like to mention that the last caller was Eliza Olson, who is the president of the Burns Bog Conservation Society, and who I think is responsible single-handedly for educating the public as broadly as it has been for the bog. She has been instrumental in creating a large group of dedicated membership. I'm being waved at again, the lamp's always off. Dedicated membership that has educated us all about the bog. I didn't know about it 12 or 15 years ago in any sense of duty that I feel toward it now. And I just want to thank Eliza for everything she's done for the community.
That is very true. The overall general awareness, I think, is something that has escalated to a higher level. I'm not sure who the next caller is. I believe it's Linda is our next caller. Linda?
Yes, hi.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Hello?
Yes?
Yes, I'd like to know what is the security for the $25 million government loan, and what will happen to the security if the developers default on payment of the loan? Thank you.
George, thank you.
Yeah. If the developer or proposed developer does not pay the $25 million, then the entire 5,500 acres goes to the province, as far as I know.
I suspect it's parcel D.
Well,
don't you think?
I have no idea.
We don't know.
But the bog is security for the $25 million.
Okay, well that's going to be very interesting. I believe the next caller is Lloyd.
Hi, I'm a simple soul, and I understand that the government has already lent $25 million to a company that has been foreclosed on a $17 million mortgage and owes the city of Delta $1.7 million in back taxes. Now, don't tell me, this simple soul, that the fix is not in here.
No, that's very true.
At least that's my perception of events. I wonder if the members of council present could perhaps give us
Okay, Lloyd.
that their assurances that they have played no part in any fix.
Okay, Lloyd, no, I was, and I'll say this very right up front. We just asked this question of Mr. Waddell, whether or not there was a possible fix in. When was it known earlier on? I've spoken to all members of the council, and I am a very firm believer that the council will do everything necessary to take all necessary precautions one way or the other so that nothing erroneous will happen.
We just asked Mr. Waddell that because the taxes have been outstanding for over 2 years now. And I was told this afternoon that the new company paid the taxes 2 hours after the provincial press conference yesterday. And so did they use the 20
out of the $25 million?
That's right. Did they use that loan to do that?
That's the question you've got to ask.
Yeah.
Of course they did.
Yes, exactly.
And they also paid off the amount owing to Zurich Assurance, or that was owed the $17 million. So now apparently one property owner, Delta Pacific Properties, owns the entire 5,500 acres, and it's free and clear as far as they're concerned.
Well, we'll see. We do have another caller on the line. Peter.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for calling.
Absolutely not with this bog thing. You know, this whole scenario reminds me of an incident on number 10 highway the other night. It well, let's say socio-economic studies, traffic studies, environmental studies. Reminds me of a manure truck I passed the other day on number 10 highway. It had a sign on the side of it that said BS trucking. But here's the solution to it all, and that is that we can kill two flies with one smack here. Let's give them the dump there, They can build their theme park on that, and we'll take the bog. We don't want a provincial park there. We don't want a GVRD park there. That's Delta land. We want a Delta bog. Let's get rid of the dump. It's a financial disaster anyways. We're only getting $900,000 a year from the GVRD for the dump. We give them the dump to build the theme park. We'll get $10 million in taxes, and we end up with the bog intact. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter. We do have another caller, Blair.
Unfortunately, we can't
Yeah. Yes.
Ian Waddell is high on Calgary cocaine. Where do I want to go with this?
Go ahead.
Is it, are you going to say the EDI fracas that you
Get it out?
fracas you had down in the bog area?
Yes, for the media event you're talking about?
No.
I can't understand what he's saying.
I'm sorry, we can't, it's very tough to make you out in studio here, so...
You know, we were talking earlier before we went on air about some of the ironies and all of this, and one of them was the fact that we've been so strident with the provincial government about the fact that, you know, we didn't want casinos here in Delta, and we made a presentation regarding casinos on the reserve, the TFN reserve, and it's almost sort of a cruel twist now to say that we're probably going to have something like that over here in the bog where it really doesn't belong. And it's...
Yeah. Except there is a slight difference in that no other proposal that's come forward with respect to the bog or anywhere else in Delta dealing with a piece of private land ever said to the community that we're going to give you as a gift 3,000 some odd acres. I don't believe that's enough. That's my personal feeling. But that's what makes this particular development proposal different from all the others that have been brought forward.
Okay, we do have another caller on the line. Margaret.
May I change the subject?
Sure.
There seems to be so much information we do not have.
No, that's very
to spend
true.
all our time discussing this. I want to get back to a little itty-pitty thing.
Sure, go ahead.
What do these councillors feel about the secrecy of the expense accounts in the municipal hall, and also Mayor Johnson's comments that she saw absolutely nothing wrong with employees treating one another to lunch and dinner on an expense account, which is coming out of my pocket? I'd love to hear what these three councillors say.
Okay, we'll do them one at a time. George, you can go first if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think that Delta is obviously, as councillors, we're concerned about how public money is spent. There is nothing to stop any one of us councillors going to a member of the executive, whether it's the chief administrative officer or someone else, and asking for the information about how his or her expenses accumulated, whether it was entertaining someone or this person or that person. So there's no problem in us getting the information. But under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, we are not in a position to divulge that information to the public because it may contain the names, well, it would contain the names of third parties, people who are not necessarily employees of the municipality. Many of them may be developers who are looking for some kind of opportunity to develop in the municipality and so on. So that's the problem. What we've asked is that the province perhaps change its legislation to enable councillors to receive that information, provided we will, again, receive it in camera as a council. But individual councillors, there's nothing to stop us from asking all the questions we want. We have an expense policy. We have people who hold the people making claims accountable for their expenses. And as far as I'm concerned, that policy seems to be working reasonably well. A couple of instances that have received a fair amount of press are ones that we have to look into. But I don't suspect there's anything wrong. Not at all at this particular point.
Okay, Vicki, would you or Wendy like to jump in? We do have another caller on the line, too.
I would like to jump in here, and I'll be quite a bit more emphatic. To use an earlier word, I'm dumbfounded with the fact that staff even requested that there be an opinion on the issue. Secondly, I've had other legal people tell me that they disagreed with this opinion. Thirdly, senior employees, other than those that have the credit cards, are not allowed to expense their lunches in this in this municipality. Fourthly, no councillor can have lunch or take anybody to lunch in Delta. We can only expense it if we're at a business luncheon outside of the municipality. So thirdly and fifthly, I just simply can't believe we don't have access to anything we need to have access to in the municipality.
Well,
I do not for 1 minute, we do not, and I do not for 1 minute think that there was necessarily anything wrong. But we ought to be able to determine that for ourselves if we so wish.
Okay, Wendy, do you want to jump in? Because we do have one more caller I want to get to before we
I feel
finish.
it's been a bit of a tempest in a teapot. Vicky is right. We can't go out and treat ourselves and treat each other. There is only one corporate credit card, and it's held by the CAO. We can get information if we wanted, and I got it 2 days ago, and I have no difficulty getting that. I think where you run into difficulty is when you try and adapt to the wording of the Act as it is written, it becomes ridiculous. And it's particularly ridiculous when you consider that before the Act was actually in place, one could just simply come in and get that information.
Well, they're not
now you have an Act that frustrates that for a lot of people. But I was able to get what I wanted 2 days ago without any difficulty whatsoever.
Okay, good. We do have one more caller on the line. Edith.
Yes, Councillor Jeske and Councillor Huntington.
Yes.
Ms. Jeske, you are one of the more persons that has been doing more things for Delta. Please, let's try to keep the bog the way it is. We don't need more traffic. We don't need more, as soon as the traffic comes, we need a new bridge. It's just like they done with the new bridge they built. We have all the Surrey traffic. They haven't done anything with Northern Way. We have North Delta has been completely in the cold. We cannot go on our streets safe because of so much traffic. More crime will be with that project that they try to build.
Okay, point well taken, Edith. We do have another caller on the line. Sorry to cut you short. Diane? I believe Diane's there. Diane?
Yes?
Diane, yes. Thank you for calling. Your question?
Yes, a comment as well.
Yes, please feel free.
I think I agree with everything that all of you have said in all the issues, but I think one issue that hasn't even been approached yet, except perhaps by the previous caller, is the impact on the livability in North Delta. I was, as you were, dumbfounded when I heard it on the news last Saturday, and my first response was, if it goes ahead, I'm going to sell. I walk in the bog now. I'm fortunate enough to have that access. I can walk from home. In terms of thinking of expanding the highway, the noise now is incredible, even as you walk. And to think that all these people who are going to visit this center, if it does go ahead, are going to use these highways that are being going to be expanded to 91, 10, 17. That was supposed to happen when they put 91 in. And now we can't get out of our subdivisions on 72nd. These people are not just going to come from those highways into that development. They're going to be coming, there's going to be even more traffic through. And even now, 72nd is parking lot.
Yeah, 72nd is just a real bottleneck. It's just a nightmare when you drive down 72nd. My sympathy to the residents to try and back out of the driveways off 70, out of the driveway onto 72nd there, because I don't know how they do it in the first place, never mind pulling in their driveway. Pretty horrendous. But
well, I'm even in that area just below 72nd, below 112 off 72nd.
Yes, that's...
And even trying to get out of our own subdivision.
No, that's true.
And I think it's going to have a terrible impact. Plus, I don't know if it's mentioned since, but I saw in the paper that they even considered placing the Indian there.
Oh,
no, that's a
no-go.
That's a no-go right there. So anyway, thank you very much, Dan. Time is running relatively short here. Would either one of you like to jump in and add some stuff? We've only got a short period of time right now. Wendy?
Well, I think that we're going to have to see an application come into the hall that we can actually look at and determine for ourselves what this means. I think this is about the third one. We were given word in November that there was an individual trying to assemble parcels of land around the bog, and I think his quest failed. And then we were told that the province was trying to put something together, and this is what has come up. I don't think anybody anticipated anything as big as this.
No kidding. Time is really drawn, so
and I'm only interested in seeing, well, I'm not particularly interested in seeing an application of this nature, but I am only interested in seeing one that talks turkey. I don't want to sit there, as Mr. Waddell suggested, and whittle back and bargain here and there. What are you going to take? What do you want? What are you going to give us?
I think it could be a win-win, provided it meets certain tests and that have to satisfy the public of Delta.
No kidding. Okay, I want to thank all of you. And the Chamber of Commerce held the new elections. Special congratulations to Bob Ferguson, the outgoing president, for everything he's done over the past year. And we want to thank the councillors for joining us. Mr. Waddell from Victoria, leaving everyone with a final reminder. If you truly want to test your memory, try to remember what you were thinking about 1 year ago today. Good night. Talk to you next week.